Hi, my name's Coop. My real name's Gregg Cooper, but everybody calls me Coop. I'm a pinstriper from Ohio. Been doing this for 40 some years, but Ed Roth was my teacher, my mentor, way back in the 80s when I was really trying to learn how to do this. Ed was the only guy that would help me. He sent me videos and books, and I talked to him on the phone, got advice for this or that. And that's basically how I learned to do all of this. When I was a kid, I'm 10 years old, one of the crazes of the time was building model kits. We didn't have video games and internet and all that kind of stuff, so a lot of kids were into slot cars, building model cars, monsters and all that. Well, Ratfink was a model kit that came out from Revell, and I latched on to all of that stuff as a kid. So I knew who Ed Roth was when I was a little kid. And when I got old enough to get into cars, I wasn't so much a go fast kind of guy. I was more interested in decoration and customizing a vehicle. And I wanted to learn how to pinstripe. And I come across one of the articles, one of the ads that Ed had put in the car books about, learn how to pinstripe. He had little books that he made and would sell you a pinstripe brush and all that. So I sent away to get some of that. And when I got my first package, I got a little note with it that said, if you need help, got questions, call me. And he gave me his phone number. And through the years, I would call Ed, how do you do this? How do you do that? I needed to learn how to letter. He taught me how to use a quill, taught me what paints to use, where to get brushes, all kinds of technical stuff. But he also taught me a lot about the business, a lot about life in general. And he always invited me to come out to the Ratfink reunions. At the time, I had little kids, was married, really couldn't get away for a weekend. A guy from Ohio driving all the way or flying to LA for a weekend party just didn't seem too logical at the time. But as time went on, it's like, I really need to do this. And I started coming out to the reunions. And I've been going to the Ratfink reunion since 1990. I haven't missed one. It's my annual trek to Mecca, so to speak, because this is really where my heart lives, with Ed and all the custom people, custom stripers, custom painters. Ed was a huge influence on my life. Living in Columbus, never really had a lot of contact with custom car people. It was more, just mainstream America. And I really would not have been where I am now if I hadn't had my relationship with Ed. All the people that I know from around here, all the friends that I have, all comes back to my relationship with Ed. When I would come to the reunions and I got to know Ed fairly well. We would come out every year, and when him and Eileen got together, I got to know her fairly well. And Ed paid me probably the biggest honor that anybody could have possibly paid me. That when he passed away, they asked me to pinstripe and letter his casket. And I painted a Ratfink on Ed's casket and decorated it up for his funeral, which was an honor beyond honors for me. And to this day, it still kind of baffles me as to why he picked me to do this, since he knows so many people in the business that would have been happy to do the same thing. But it still baffles me to this day. Well, I've asked Eileen that, and Ed kind of liked me because of my lifestyle. Ed was a very conservative guy. Didn't like to drink, didn't smoke, didn't do drugs, any of that kind of stuff.
Family man?
Huh?
He's a real family man?
Yes, he was definitely a family man. Loved kids, loved his friends, very sociable kind of guy. Would help anybody with anything. But he kind of took a liking to me, I guess. and kind of always shepherded me along. And like I said, he was a mentor to me, and that was probably one of the reasons. And Eileen said he liked the way I drew ratfinks. And so my ratfinks were really kind of crude compared to what some people can do. But Ed was kind of crude in a lot of his ratfinks too. It was kind of sketchy, not a lot of detail in them. If he wanted something really slick, he had artists that he knew to do ratfinks and car drawings enough for his t-shirts. Didn't do a lot of that himself. And and there's a book out called The Art of Ed Big Daddy Roth that has a lot of his pen and ink sketches in it. And you'll see what I mean if you go and look at some of the stuff that he was basically doodling. And it was more about the idea of the sketch as opposed to the precision of the drawing. It was always an idea of some kind that he always had a saying to go along with it. And Ed was always hip with the younger kids. He was always up on the current slang, the current trends. He was always looking for new stuff. He wasn't a guy that was stuck in his childhood. He lived everybody's childhood, but up to the day he died. So he was always looking for the new thing. Whenever he was doing shirts and stuff at a car show, he would always have current slang sayings and stuff that were on his t-shirts, because they were generally aimed at the younger kids. And he loved cars. He loved building cars. He loved working with his hands. He was a craftsman, besides a very creative guy. It still amazes me to this day, the things that came out of that man's head is unbelievable sometimes. There's the joke going around about he would always put these little notes up on the bulletin board at the grocery store, or put ads in the local newspaper looking for a UFO motor. He wanted a UFO motor to put in his new car. So, so he would do all kinds of silly stuff like that. It was a lot of fun. You're taking a floppy-haired brush that's made of squirrel hair, and it takes a little bit to control it. But the key to it is loading the brush, getting the paint the correct consistency, and getting the right brush. Every brush has a personality. So they're all hand wound, they're all handmade. They're not manufactured by a machine. So they're all a little bit different. Some brushes will pull a really good straight line, but you try to do a curve with it, it just doesn't work. Some brushes will do a beautiful curve one direction and not the other. So finding a really good brush is a trick. And once you get a hold of one, you want to take care of it. A brush will last a long time if you take good care of it. But they're getting harder and harder to find because they're all made of natural hair. It's part of the fur business. There's a company in Michigan that makes striping brushes. It's the only company in the Western Hemisphere that makes quality brushes, Mac Brush, and they get the hair for their brushes from the furrier auctions over in Europe. And the fur coat manufacturers don't use the tails of the animal, and that's where this hair comes from. So it's getting harder and harder for them to find quality hair because the furrier business is really going away for many reasons. And they've come out with some synthetic hairs and things like that. They're okay for certain applications, but for pinstriping brushes like this, I've never found a synthetic brush that I really like. It's actually a physical skill. It's just like any physical skill that you develop. It's you have muscle memory from repetition. You got to be able to good eye-hand coordination it's most important, really. Like I say, it's a very physical thing. if you're striping on a car, you've got to be able to put your body in a proper position, be able to see what you're doing and pull that line straight. Pulling a long straight line is the hardest thing to do. Doing design work like this is relatively easy compared to that. But getting a consistent line width, it's pressure on the brush. The more you push down, the wider the stripe's going to be. But at the same time, the consistency of the paint has to be right. And the working conditions is another thing. If you're working at a car show where you're outside, you're fighting the elements. You've got heat if you're in a place where it's really warm. Wind, it will affect what you're doing. Lighting is another thing, being able to see what you're doing. But if you're in a hot environment, the paint's going to dry up in the brush as you're pulling the line. You'll go 1 foot down the line and the brush will start to harden up on you because the paint's drying in the brush. So it's all getting everything in the right proportions, and it's sometimes it's really tough. Working outside is really an ordeal sometimes.
You got any final remarks, Coop?
Final
remarks. Sage advice, wisdom.
Well,
for the youth.
wisdom of youth. Practice. In today's world, very few people want to develop a manual skill. They think everything is cerebral, working in computers and all this kind of stuff. If you want to make a good living, learn a skill. There's no welders in the world anymore. There's no mechanics in the world anymore. The schools have eliminated industrial arts classes, teaching kids how to use their hands. You'd be surprised the number of young guys that don't know how to use a wrench. The guys that don't know how to use their hands. Mechanical stuff just sends them into a tizzy. My son went to tech school, took a 2-year college course under a Ford. Thank you. A program that Ford sponsored for Ford Motor Company. When he got out of school, they placed him in a dealership as a diesel mechanic. He's been working as a diesel mechanic for about 8 or 10 years now. His skills are in so demand that people are trying to take him away from the dealership he works at. He's making 6 figures a year, more than most computer people are making, because he knows how to fix cars. Learn a skill. That would be my advice to anybody.